Thank you, Gwyn. Thank you so much for that, and excited to be here. And so we're here to talk about eco-friendly web design and how to reduce your website's carbon footprint. A beautiful sunny day here today as well in Hertfordshire. So I'll start off with telling you a little bit about myself before we get into it. I operate at the intersection of sustainability and technology. Studied computer science at University of Hertfordshire many years ago. Been in the IT industry for about 20 years, big IT to startups as well, small startups. I witnessed large excesses and unsustainable practices in the IT sector. And when I began to sort of learn about the internet's carbon emissions and the high energy consumption, it literally shocked me. A tech London advocate, I'm also a sustainable tech advisor, founded the Eco-Friendly Web Alliance, father of 2 children living in leafy Hertfordshire, but not quite in the leafy part. Why do I do this? I left my corporate job about 4 years ago, and I founded a sustainable innovation tech ecosystem. A bunch of us got together and we co-developed a sustainable innovation manifesto. Then we began to sort of explore ways in which we can reduce carbon emissions and in websites and digital infrastructure. This led to a little bit of a people-led movement towards a cleaner internet. We're currently helping over 40 purpose-driven organizations in reducing their carbon emissions of their websites and digital platforms. As to why I do this, I care about people and the environment, and I want to do something about it through my work. So now that's out of the way, let's get into, well, let me hand you over to Gwyn.
Okay, can you stop your share? Well,
sure.
Right. So hopefully you can see the Mentimeter instructions. If you're not familiar with this, all you need to do is to go to www.mentimeter.com, just open a window up with that and enter this code 69235723, and you'll see a question come up. So I'm just going to move the screen on. It'll take a few seconds for people to get that. So what we do initially is find out, what is it you've come here to find out today? So if you use the link at the top of that page, you can copy that and put it in your browser. And as soon as you get to that, you'll be able to answer the question that comes up. So if you could start to do that, that would be great. Just give you a minute or so for that. It's not a long process. I'll put the code in it's in the chat if you aren't seeing it on the screen. Shane, are you seeing the Mentimeter question on the screen?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Okay, so everybody should be now. Okay. So just a few seconds for people to put their thoughts in there. That will give Shane some guidance on how to move the emphasis of the talk today so that we're relevant, hopefully, for what you're coming in. Okay, so that's the first answer in there, learning about this process. Maybe a bit about what your own concerns are with whether you're a website developer or not. Super. So that's a nice range of different backgrounds and different perspectives we've got coming already. Yeah, lovely. So just in case someone hasn't got the screen, I'll just read these out as they come. Learning about this process, understanding how I can lower my impact when I build websites. I'm not a tech person, but a sustainability consultant to tech companies. So I want to understand more on the technical side. And the last one we've got is learn about the potential for making a website more sustainable to give better advice to clients. Okay, that's a nice range. Shane, I'll hand over to you now.
Bear with me.
Thanks for your input, everybody.
Brilliant. I mean, this is really good. A variety of responses. So it's really exciting to see that as to why each of us are here. Okay, this is, so before we get into it, and whilst we sort of address some of those basically responses, we'll take a moment to sort of reflect on why we are here as well. As we've seen, as climate change is here, there's no debate about it anymore, luckily. And we've seen more and more sort of menacing extreme weather events. The frequency of that has been increasing. Ocean sort of temperatures wise, it's been the hottest ever recorded. And to limit global warming to 1.5 degrees, projections show that we are twice as much as where we need to be from a global emission sort of perspective. So there's a lot that needs to be done. So every bit matters, if you like. And as we all know, it's a main driver of biodiversity loss. And these climate disasters are very costly as well, from a people perspective, the human costs, as well as monetarily as well. And a lot of vulnerable countries are susceptible to effects of these disasters. So from an agenda perspective, we'll look at how we can measure what we're looking at from a carbon emission sort of perspective. What can we do about data and these bloated websites that we see from time to time? Green energy, how do we power websites with green energy, and how can we sort of do something about it? How can we take responsibility? So those are the areas that I'm planning to cover today. And we are currently working with over 40 purpose-driven organizations. We will identify a lot of them that are members of ASP. This is not an exhaustive list. I've just put a few logos there. Some of you in the room may have your sort of companies, your organizations in this as well. And let's start off by talking about the internet. What are we looking at? Internet's carbon emissions are at 3.7% at the moment. That's 3.7% of the global carbon emissions. So you could think of the internet as the world's largest coal-powered machine. It's really there's a big carbon emissions basically from a carbon emissions sort of perspective. It's more than the aviation industry. We used to say it's basically closer to the aviation industry, but it's more than the aviation industry, and that's an industry that gets singled out very often and gets brunt of the blame. But internet has been racking up a big carbon bill. It also consumes 10% of the world's energy as well. So 1/10 of the world's energy goes in terms of powering the internet. This is a third. If you were to look at internet as a country, if internet were to be a country, it's the third largest after USA and China. And more worryingly, these emissions are set to double by 2025. So it's a little bit of a bleak picture, but there's things we could do to kind of alleviate that. So when we talk about the internet, there's a key sort of a core relationship to look at. Data is hosted in all these places, in the cloud, all these servers. They are using real energy resources, electricity. And as we know, 80% of electricity is from fossil fuel sources as per the global energy mix, although the picture is a little bit better from a UK perspective, but it's still a work in progress with regards to using renewable energy to power some of these things. So at the moment, we are looking at 80% is the fossil fuel sort of sources in terms of the electricity generation. So, there's real carbon emissions due to this consumption. So that relationship is really important, data with basically carbon emissions. And obviously a cleaner, green internet is good for everyone, and that's why we're here today. Gwen, it's over to you. Let's ask the audience a few questions, get some feedback. We can't hear you, Gwen. Sorry, you're mute.
Thank you, Shane. Sorry about that. Yeah, this next slide is just to gather a cross-section across the group of, what are your current roles? So you're filling that in beautifully. We've got 4 there. So I think we identified those groups quite well then, Shane, who's there. Okay, thanks for that. So that's the context we're dealing with today. Back to you then, Shane.
That's great to see. So there's again a bit of a wide spectrum being represented there. So that's good to see. So we'll start off with measurement. Internet emissions. So you can't obviously manage what we can't measure. Peter Drucker, that's the famous quote, is relevant here. So we'll start in terms of measurement, and in that regard, we built a carbon calculator for websites. It's in its sort of first version. It's not perfect, but it does the job, and there'll be a better version to come in the forthcoming weeks, which will give you more of a real-time indication of where you are in terms of your website's carbon emissions. So that can be used as a way in which you could say if you make an improvement and you want to go and check, has it made an impact? It'll be useful from that perspective as well. At the moment, it's done sort of on a daily kind of basis, so you might not sort of see immediate sort of change, but you may get refreshed the next day. It's a good way to kind of look at what we're dealing with from your website's carbon emissions perspective. One thing to remember is that the amount of data, let's say the page weight, has got a direct correlation with the amount of energy it uses when it loads the web page from the data center on your end user device. So lighter the web pages, the better it is for the environment, because less data is transferred across the wire. There's some brilliant work done by many others as well. Tim Frick, Tom Greenwood. There's another carbon calculator out there as well, which is really useful. So these are good ways in which we can initiate that conversation and get people to sort of start acting on that, and taking responsibility in terms of trying to limit your own website's carbon emissions in the process. So it's available on website emissions.com. It's a free and open tool for everybody to use. So websites, they come up in all sort of sizes and shapes, as we all know. But if we were to look at it from a carbon emissions sort of perspective, I'll start off with the heavy and the bloated lot, if you like. We've come across quite a lot of websites that are site owners themselves don't realize, but all these sort of components, features, they can add a lot of weight, and that could result in a lot of carbon emissions. So we do get to see quite a lot of heavy and bloated websites. That's sort of that orange circle, if you like. And the average website that we measured is around 2 to 2.5 grams of CO2 every time somebody visits a web page. So that's the sort of the average we're looking at. What we're trying to get to initially is that eco-friendly website situation when it's producing less than 1 gram of CO2 per page view. So that's a good starting point. So we're looking at least around 50 to 60% reduction in carbon emissions, and getting to that under 1 gram of CO2. And this is achievable. We have proven so as well. We have developed quite a few websites ourselves. They look great. They're pretty easy on the eye. From an aesthetic appeal perspective also, they're very good. and they're highly functional websites, but we've still managed to do that under 1 gram of CO2 per page view, so making it eco-friendly. But this is only the starting point, and what we're trying to sort of get to is create a movement towards climate positivity in terms of your websites and digital platforms. How do we do that? We'll talk about it later on in the presentation, but here is when we are basically taking a bit more responsibility. Now you can get an idea. We can give you a calculation as to what you're looking at from an annual sort of carbon emissions perspective. Now that you've reduced your website's carbon emissions, let's say you're an eco-friendly website, you can, judging by the user numbers to the site, we can get a calculation as to what you're emitting as a website for the whole year. And then you can look at ways in which you can basically channel it through regenerative farming. ASP has got a fantastic member there, or reforestation in terms of offsetting that and taking a bit more accountability and responsibility to mitigate that, going towards climate positivity. So visualizing website carbon emissions. So an average website with just under 5,000 monthly page views produces 100 kilograms of CO2 per year. So, and this is the average website. And you can think what the number might be for really bloated websites and the difference it makes when you go down from, let's say, 5 grams to 1 gram or 6 grams to 0.8 grams, which is really achievable. So 100 kilograms of CO2 that the average website produces for a year, equates to 483 kilometers on a standard fossil fuel powered car, or 1,500 kilometers in an average electric car. And this could light an LED bulb for just over 4 years. So it's a fairly a lot of energy in that regard. So just wanted us to sort of reflect on this for a second, the impact of what your potentially your website might be emitting from a carbon emissions perspective. So let's look at the average web page sizes. So in 2003, it was measured to be around 93 kilobytes. This is as per the HTTP archive. They've been sort of recording this. So this is just the average, there may have been like bigger sites, smaller sites, but the average in 2003 was just 93 kilobytes. In 2010, it was 702 kilobytes. Whereas in 2012, when London had the Olympics, it was around 1.8 megabytes, so 1,850 kilobytes, the average web page size. And 2017, it was a whopping, 3,442 kilobytes. So websites have become bigger and bigger and bigger. HTTP archive, they've sort of stopped doing the averages at the moment, but it's assumed to be around 3 to 4 basically megabytes, or 3,000, 4,000 basically kilobytes at the moment, where we are currently at. But at the 90th percentile, you get really heavy websites as well, like 7, 8 megabytes. So this is a real problem. Websites have been getting considerably bigger and bigger and bigger. And average size of web page has increased by 32 times when you look at what they were in 2003. So how can you reduce page weight and the bloat? So a good starting point would be is there are plenty of tools out there on the internet. You can get an idea about what your web page measures at from a web page weight perspective. So if you're currently at 1.5 megabytes, you can easily bring it down to something like 800 kilobytes or even a lot lower. We've done sites that are have got sufficient sort of components to convey your message. They look great, they're highly functional and quite light in terms of the page weight as well. That has got a correlation with the amount of energy it uses. So, how do you sort of go about doing that is by getting a measurement with regards to your web page weight, and then and aim towards a certain sort of a target and then work towards that. So the sweet spot, a website can be both high performant as well as low carbon, and that is achievable. That's very, very achievable. So the sweet spot that we need to sort of get to is that bit in the middle, where it is a high performance website or high performance website, as well as low carbon. And that's a good place to be. And there's a correlation with usability as well. A high performance website, it loads really fast. Google and search engines do like these websites as well. The algorithm looks at these sites favorably as well. So it's easy for your audiences to find your website, as well as it loads really fast. So everyone's pretty happy. And it can be at the same time low carbon as well, and better from an environmental sort of perspective. So what are we looking at? What does sort of make up a website, right? So what's in a website? And typically, these were by Pingdom. They're basically a 2017 a survey. They found basically images take up a lot of space and weight, if you like, of a web page, a typical web page, followed by video and other things like CSS, style sheets, HTML, custom fonts, and a lot of other things. But the majority of it was coming from basically images. They were the biggest contributor to a web page size or weight, if you like. But in 2021, videos have sort of overtaken that. So if you're having any videos, basically think again, do I really need to have that basically video on the web page itself? And there are YouTube and Vimeo and other services that are good places to basically host that. You can basically provide a link. If you're using videos, try and sort of compress them, and then also question, do I really need to sort of have that in the first place? Images, once again, you can evaluate those as well. So it's starting off with basically images and videos are a good starting point, and you might see an immediate sort of impact in terms of reducing your web page size, weight, as well as bloat by addressing and evaluating and taking steps. So let's, since we started off talking about, or we were talking about images rather, the main thing to think about is, how do we choose images in a wise manner, in a sensible manner. So try and avoid full screen images as much as possible. Win and I got rid of one just yesterday, and we saw a 0.22 reduction from a carbon perspective, immediate sort of reduction by taking one image, which was a full length image. We realized, and when we evaluated, that it's not sort of really necessary. It wasn't serving a purpose per se, so we got rid of it. Just evaluate what images you've got on the website. What do I really need? Try and avoid full screen images as much as possible. If you're using images, compress them. Of course, we will have typically a few images on a website. There are plenty of tools out there. Tiny PNG is a good one. So if you're uploading a new image, for example, you can go to tinypng.com and upload the image. It'll give you a file to download. They look essentially the same, but it's much lighter from a file size perspective. So it'll bring the page weight down, as well as the site will be a lot more faster for it as well. And also sort of pay attention to the kind of sort of file formats you're using. So for images, for example, photographs, JPEG, WebPs are much better. And again, compress them before you sort of upload to your websites. From a code perspective, a few things to sort of remember. Do watch out for heavy themes, these templates that you can purchase, because they come with quite a lot of bloat to begin with, because they are developed so that they can cater for different variety of sort of situations. So they have quite a lot of unnecessary sort of parts to it. So do watch out for them, and make assessments before you start sort of working with a template. Those frameworks as well, front-end frameworks, there's plenty out there. So if you're a developer, if you're using those frameworks, do watch out for those as well. Make your evaluations, do your own research. try not to sort of use some of those frameworks that are quite bloated and heavy. In terms of some of the assets within the website, styles, functions, filters, and graphics, etc., try and sort of reuse them, recycle them. That'll kind of keep the site quite lean as well. So that's something that you could do. And remove any unnecessary scripts that are not required. There are various things sort of running in the background. You can assess them, remove them, the ones that you do not need. So let's swiftly move on to content side of things. Again, these are some of the things, websites do not necessarily sort of keep pace with us as to where we are as an organization or as a person. So does your website really contribute to, achieving your organization's mission? Does it sort of reflect what I'm currently doing? Does the content delivered in a way, is the content delivered in a way that your audience want to kind of consume it? Am I sort of presenting the content in a way that what my audience likes and wants? So question that. So if the content does not serve a purpose, chances are it's wasting a lot of energy and also frustrating your users as well. So may not even be good for your brand as well. In addition to the wasting a lot of energy as well as emitting carbon in the process. So that sort of leads us to search engine optimization. On average, nearly 70% of users start their journey on search engines. So they find you through search engines and arrive at your site. So a question whether you have basically enabled your website users to find the pages they're looking for through SEO. So have I really done that? Am I making it easy for somebody to find my site as well as the content? So think and reflect on the information sort of flow or the architecture and the journeys that some of the users may take when they're in your site, as well as finding the site in the first place. And also think about how do people sort of navigate your site and remove the need to navigate through multiple unnecessary pages, and it's very inefficient. It is wasteful as an exercise because the users will be sort of wasting a lot of energy. There'll be higher amount of carbon emissions through the high energy consumption as well in the process. So it's a very wasteful exercise. So think about that aspect as well. So I'll just swiftly sort of talk about some of the other tips very quickly. We spoke about frameworks. So, try not sort of work with frameworks that are bloated. They're built to be able to sort of cater for different varieties, situations. So they tend to be heavy, some of them. If you have any videos, try not to sort of autoplay them. So you get these autoplay videos. We find them very often. There's a little bit of inequality as well, because it could consume, let's say, users with a lower data plan. It might sort of consume their data very quickly as well, because you're forcing them to kind of go through that video without giving the option to the user. From usability perspective, also it's poor, but also from environmental perspective as well. There's it basically uses a lot of energy as well as emits a lot of carbon. If you're using videos, if you really need to have them, compress those video files, or use those basically external hosts like YouTube, for example. But try and sort of avoid videos as much as possible. Avoid animated GIFs. Custom fonts are, they tend to be heavy. So question, do I really need to have these custom fonts? Are there other workarounds? Because you may be able to find similar fonts that are system fonts that are quite like the custom font, for example. Question the tracking and the advertising sort of scripts that you may have running on these web pages. Do I really need to have them? If you do, keep it quite lean. Reduce sort of requests to the data center in terms of processing, etc. So try and sort of look at that aspect as well. Reduce animation where possible. If there's a component on your website, you're not quite sure whether is it really needed, does it really serve a purpose? If in doubt, leave it out is our advice. So this is the third basically area, green energy. We're quite getting closer to the end of the presentation, so we'll very quickly look at the internet and electricity. So internet is made up of, as you know, all these devices, networks, interconnected networks. So data centers, from electricity consumption perspective, the biggest contributor is through data centers, and all our websites, data are hosted in these data centers, which is quite away from our sort of eye, if you like. Some are sort of found in the countryside, in warehouse that are sort of quite away from the public view. So in a way, it's sort of a contributing factor as well to these carbon emissions, because we don't think of, when it comes to websites or the internet, we don't think of carbon emissions. It's not our first thought. So data centers sort of contribute to roughly around 48% of the internet's carbon emissions. Also, transmission networks, particularly in this, when we're accessing stuff through mobile devices, etc., and there's transmission networks come into play. There are other scenarios as well as end user devices. But end user devices aren't the biggest contributor to internet's carbon emissions. It's the data centers. That's well documented. So green hosting, there's a little bit of a choice now. Green Web Foundation has done some work on that. We ourselves have done some work on this in terms of identifying web hosting providers that are powering their data centers through clean green energy. It's a bit of a mixture of things. This REGOs, something called PPAs, purchase power agreements, etc. But there are carbon credits and all of that. But quite a few of these data centers we've begun to see are now moving towards clean and green energy, or transition towards that. And there's a good list available on Green Web Foundation, as well as we maintain a list as well. So if anybody needs help with that, we can help out. So there's quite a bit of a choice out there, but it's still very much a fraction of the overall data center situation in the UK. So from a hosting provider's perspective, I think there's over 10,000 hosting providers just in the UK, but only a fraction of them are basically using 100% clean green energy. You got to always sort of look at the small print, but this is a good bunch of data centers. Hosting providers, I should say, that use green energy. So to finally kind of reflect on a clean green internet, what is an area that we are focusing on and trying to move towards, and it's really important we get there. Looking at the carbon emissions, the bad trajectory that we are on with the carbon emissions are predicted to double by 2025. The energy consumption is set to double. It's at 10% of the world's energy for the internet, and this is set to double unless a lot of changes happen. This is set to double around 2030. So it's not a very good picture. So we need to take responsibility. So to summarize, try and sort of stay away from these bloated frameworks. Look at the performance side of things. A higher performing site is good for the environment. It's better from a user experience perspective as well. Think search engine optimizations and information flow as to how do we help users to find the information that they're looking to find in your websites. Accessibility is something that we all need to focus on. Hosting, it could have a positive impact in terms of reducing your hosting costs as well. And also from an environment cost is also something that we need to factor in. It's better from a human well-being perspective, as we all know. When there's a lot of greenhouse gases, carbon emissions in the atmosphere, it's bad from a air quality perspective, and it contributes to poor public health as well. So it's better from a human well-being perspective. It's carbon emissions has a direct impact in terms of biodiversity. So it will improve biodiversity if you were to move towards a cleaner green internet. And it's better for the planet overall. So finally, what can each one of us do about it? How can we take responsibility? How can we transition towards becoming climate positive by way of our websites and digital platforms and infrastructure? So look at ways in reduce your websites and your digital platforms, basically carbon emissions by keeping the websites quite lean, lightweight. It'll help in terms of improving your performance side of things as well. And use when the next sort of cycle comes in terms of your hosting provider, evaluate whether your hosting provider is powered by renewable energy. If not, you can, there's quite a bit of choice out there at the moment. So support the guys who are running their data centers using renewable energy, and look at things like regenerative farming or reforestation as channels through which you can basically take responsibility to reduce, or rather offset, I must add, offset your website's carbon emissions. It's a good way to look at things. So you can get a calculation as to what you're looking at as your carbon emissions for your website on an annual basis, and basically look at regenerative farming or reforestation as a means of basically offsetting them. So what we're doing is basically we've come together as a multi-organizational alliance and formed Eco-Friendly Web Alliance, and we're working towards a cleaner, a greener internet. We're the world's first eco standard for websites and digital infrastructure. We felt that it's a really important step. Otherwise, it's really unstructured, and we see a lot of consumption. And the idea is, how can we help organizations to move towards or transition towards carbon positivity in terms of their websites, platforms, and digital infrastructure. And it's really important that we take responsibility in that regard. And move towards a bit more sort of balanced and responsible consumption in line with UN Sustainable Development Goals as well. So that pretty much sort of concludes my presentation. Let me hand you back over to Gwyn. We got a question to the...
Thanks very much, Shane. A lot of good stuff there. We've got about 15 minutes now to take questions from the participants. You can do that via Mentimeter. You can type them in there if you want, but we've got a relatively small group. So you can also put them in the chat or simply raise your hand and we can take questions. So Stuart Claw has put one I know already in the chat. Stuart, maybe you could unmute and just maybe ask that question. I'm not sure whether it's directed at Shane or whether it's directed towards the group here.
Hello. Yeah, it's directed actually at Shane, because I've had a look at your website and I did just randomly a calculation for one page on ours, and it came up with a figure. So is that figure per day, or is that figure over the course of a calendar year?
It's done per page, and it's over basically what each time when somebody visits a web page, what are they emitting? So it's per page and every visit. Of course, it's offset a little bit for repeat visitors because it may have gotten cached on your browser. So at the moment, it gives you an indication what you're looking at per page visit, if you like.
Okay, that's really useful. Thank you.
Oh. Okay, anyone else got questions?
Gwen, may I?
Yes, please, Jagdish, yes.
Hi, I wanted to ask you, so do you have tools that people could put on their website to say this is kind of eco-friendly Web Alliance okayed website, or this passes this test, like many do, this is antivirus certified, this is that, and this we could say is an eco-friendly website according to this alliance or according to that group?
Excellent question, Jagdish. Absolutely. So we basically came together as a multi-organizational alliance, Eco-Friendly Web Alliance. In that, it's completely an independent process. It's an objective assessment. There's an 8-member scientific advisory committee. Professor Ed Morrison of Purdue, formerly at Purdue University, Dr. Mixmeyer, as well as Professor Marisa Levine. Gwyn is part of that advisory committee as well, given his computing background. So it is up to the the standards committee in terms of the review and the progression of the standard. So that's currently happening, and we've already certified a few organizations within the ASP community in terms of that eco-friendly website accreditation. We have currently over 40 going through the process at the moment. It's really heartening, some of the reductions. Just yesterday, one of the members that was sort of cited on the slides, Future Ecologic, they went from 1.6 grams to 1.4, and then down to 0.35 grams. So we're looking at about 470% reduction in terms of their carbon emissions. We've had sites going from like 8 grams to 0.8 grams. So you can see the percentage from percentage sort of perspective, the reduction. So it's an independent process, and we already have it underway in terms of certifying some of these websites and setting a powerful example as well for others to follow as well, and encourage others to sort of ask the right questions from their developers. Ask yourselves when you're sort of attempting to put together a website, and also encourage the use of sort of green energy as well in the process. Excellent question, Jagdish.
Thank you. So I could submit my website to you, and we could do that process independently. Is that possible?
Absolutely, Jagdish. Yes.
Okay. So Gwen, wonderful. So you can send me some links, and I'd love to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, well, Shane is on our members page now, but yes, I'll make sure you've got that connection anyway.
Thank you.
Anyone else with questions? While you're maybe considering a question, I'll just give some feedback on the process that I went through with Shane. I sort of add stuff to our website, and I have some control over the design, but I'm by no means a techie. But the thing that really pleased me about the whole process was that just going through it, the simple changes I made in about an hour and a half, not just improved the performance and reduced the carbon footprint, but made the whole layout of the site just so much better. It had just incrementally grown to be, as Shane pointed out in one of the things, it just was not fulfilling the purpose we'd set it out for, because we'd got too much data up there in a relatively unstructured way. So the simple steps I took immediately improved the effectiveness and quality of the website. And in sustainability, especially corporate sustainability, there's always this question of, do I do good or do I make good profit? Well, I've always said that if you do good, you will make more profit. And this is proving again this idea that the better your website is, the greener it is. It just works hand in hand together. Okay, some other questions come in from Anne Beavis. I've got your name right. Is SEO impacted by making any of these changes? And if you want to come on camera and ask any additional details to that question, feel free. Could be good to speak with you. You're muted.
So shall I try and answer that question?
Yeah, I think Anne's just sorting out her, yeah, go for it.
Or shall we? All right.
Is that working now?
Hey, Anne, good to see you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I couldn't.
Your sound's gone again, Anne. Shane, answer the question while Anne sorts out, if you can.
So you can evaluate the SEO as you go. You can, of course, it's something that you can look at on a regular basis anyway, and it's healthy for the site. It's better for the site. It's better for the users themselves, and it helps in terms of finding the right information. In terms of the changes you're making, it depends on the change that you're making, really. So if you're not making a lot of changes and changing the page structure and where information is at, that can have an impact. Then you need to afterwards review how the SEO is done as well. So it really depends. But if you have like a very specific question, I would love to help you answer. Do reach out. My email address is shane@ecofriendlyweb.org, or you can find us on LinkedIn, as well as there's a YouTube channel as well. And then through the website, there's a contact form. So if you have any questions following this session, if you need any help, feel free to reach out. Sure,
Okay.
I'll type the email address here.
I'll sort that out, Shane, while you maybe take some other questions.
Sure. Thank you.
Lindsay or Kirsteen or John, you have any questions for Shane while he's here?
Don't worry, Anne.
Yeah, hello. I've got no questions, but just wanted to say thanks. It's been very interesting, and I'll certainly follow up on what I've learned today.
And hi, it's Kirsteen here, and thanks for asking me to input to it. That has been super useful. I'm a kind of a carbon and sustainability specialist. I'm increasingly working in the tech sector, and actually a lot of that was entirely new to me, so really, really interesting. I do have a small question, which is background color of websites. So I assume that just a white background with text and whatever else on it is the best, but can you elaborate slightly on that?
That's an excellent question, Kirsteen. I mean, this is, as we all know, darker backgrounds, this fewer basically pixels have to be eliminated, and which consumes a little bit of energy, quite a bit of energy. So yes, absolutely. If you can have a dark website in terms of the background color, that's the best way to go about it. But not all of us are like in favor of dark websites, or dark colors as the choices of the background color, if you like. So I would always look at what's in my website, what are the components, how many images do I have, and am I using custom fonts, or do I really need to have this sort of video or some of the other elements that make up your website. And with our tool, you can get an assessment as to what you're looking at from a carbon emissions perspective. Mm-hmm. You can get an idea using this bunch of sort of tools out there to get an idea about web page size. If it's sort of under 1 megabyte, that's a good place to be, considering the average is around, let's say, 3 to 4 megabytes. You can easily bring it down to sort of under 1 megabyte, and that's quite an environmentally friendly website. But from a carbon emission sort of perspective, do take a measurement, see where you're at, and look at ways in which you can find that balance. Because sometimes you might think, okay, with regards to your brand image, the color palette, your brand identity, sometimes there are certain colors that we want to work with, but as long as together they make sense from a balance perspective and are lightweight and emitting less carbon, then you sort of struck that balance or that sweet spot that I was alluding to earlier.
Fab, can I just clarify that I think asked that in a mixed up way, because my assumption was that a lighter white background is better, and I think you just said actually a darker background is better, so a kind of black or dark color. Is that right?
That's correct. Okay. Yes.
Very interesting. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Anybody else? Because I've got a question for Shane, but I'm not the most important person here. So if anyone else has a question, feel free to ask. While you're thinking, Shane, what your team have done and I've done is basically to have a one-off hit. We've done a one-off exercise to clean the website and make it more effective and less powerful, less power hungry. But of course, what happens, we're going to add more posts, more pages, more data. Are any of the tools you've installed on the site actually going to help essentially just put new posts up that automatically shrink the image size? I know there's some human decisions to make, but are there tools you can build into the web architecture so that you can guarantee that the images you put up, for instance, are going to be the most optimal size-wise?
Absolutely. So, very good question, Gwyn. With regards to basically the process, that's the reason why we have built an audit process. So every quarter, the sites get audited. We can do it from over the internet. It's quite carbon efficient as a process. and give you recommendations, because websites do evolve. We put a lot of stuff there. We cannot, you know, we need to keep them refreshed as well for the users, for example. So hence why we do a quarterly audit with that eco-friendly website accreditation. In terms of the tools, I mean, yes, you can go for that, you know, quite a few basically plugins that are quite useful with regards to optimizing those images that you add to the site. But it's good practice also to, you know, say, for example, if you're adding a new post to the site, you can use tools like tinypng.com, and it's an online tool. You can upload the picture and then you can download it, but it's a much smaller file size and you can't even see the difference in terms of how they look. But the most important thing is very lightweight, and it emits you know, less carbon because less energy is consumed, and it adds very minimally to the overall web page as well. That's good practice rather than just relying on tools themselves. A good practice is sort of whatever you upload to the site, add to the site to do that as practice.
Okay, we just come to the last 5 minutes. Thanks very much, Shane. I'm going to abandon the Mentimeter because it was designed for a larger group, and we're small. We don't need to run that. But first of all, I'd hope that what you've learned today from Shane is going to help you change the way you either design websites or use them, or maybe even specify them for your clients. So I'd be interested to sort of hear what you want to take away. But also, Shane, you're available to talk with all these people afterwards. If people are happy, obviously, as a member of ASP and a host here, Shane will have access to your emails. Is everyone happy that Shane can reach out and see whether there's any help he can afford you? Is that okay with people?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay. Good. Well done, Kirstine. Jagdish, yes, so that's great. Shane, is there anything you'd like to say in conclusion? Thank you, Anne.
Just a quick one, really. So if anybody needs any help, wants a bit of advice, not quite sure how to go about something, do reach out. We'd love to help you, love to support you. One thing to remember, I guess, is about responsible consumption, and that has to be applied to digital technologies as well. And that's what I wanted to conclude with. Think responsible consumption when it comes to digital technologies also.
Super. Well, look, thank everybody for coming today, and thank you, Shane. And Shane, I'm going to leave you with a question that we can talk about later, but what's the carbon footprint of Zoom calls? Because we're addicted to them at the moment, and I'm just wondering whether there are ways we can make those more carbon friendly as well. So I'll leave that thought with you for a discussion over the next couple of months. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for turning up. I will reach out to all of you briefly to thank you via email and share a couple of links on there with you. So look forward to speaking with you on future meetings, and maybe if you want to join ASP as well, you've been more than welcome. Thank you very much, Shane. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks so much.